Okay, so I've again opened the student test data.save SPSS data file. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to do a very simple scatter plot. Scatterplot is part of analyzing the relationship between two variables. Specifically, a scatter plot is basically a visual representation of the relationship between two variables, or the visual representation of what we call a correlation analysis. And as you know, correlation analysis is an actual quantifiable variable that tells us something about the relationship between two variables, like a person's height and weight, with the weight being the y variable and the height being the x variable. The correlation coefficient is a quantifiable variable that'll tell us how strong that relationship is and what type of relationship that is. And just as a quick review of correlation analysis, the closer the absolute value of the correlation coefficient gets to 1, the stronger the relationship. And the closer it gets to 0, the weaker the relationship. The sign of the correlation coefficient, whether it's positive or negative, tells us the type of the relationship. So if we were looking at a relationship between, let's say, height and weight, and we had a correlation coefficient of 0.8, it would tell us it's strong. And if it was positive, it would tell us as a person's height goes up, their weight goes up. If we had the same correlation coefficient and it was a negative 0.8, it would still be the same strength. It would still be strong because the absolute value is 0.8, which is close to 0. But it's a negative relationship, which would mean to us that as a person's height goes up, their weight goes down, which intuitively we pretty much know isn't true. Anyway, a scatter plot would be a visual representation of that relationship, and would be, and very often is kind of where a researcher starts. So what I've done here is I've opened up student test data, the SPSS student test data file, and we're going to look at the relationship through scatter plots of the relationship between student performance in the ELA 2014 and the ELA 2013. ELA, English Language Arts, representing English language. Is there a strong relationship between a student's performance in the ELA 2014 and their performance in the ELA 2013? In this case, ELA 2014 will serve as the y variable, and ELA 2013 will serve as the ex variable. In order to do a scatter plot, we simply go up to the pull-down menu, Graphs. We click on it. When the drop-down menu appears, we go to Legacy Dialogs. Another drop-down menu appears, and you'll notice down the bottom is something called Scatter Dot. We want to click on that, and a little window pops up, and it asks us to define what are we looking for. So what we're going to select here is basically the one that's kind of selected, and it's called a simple scatter. I'm just going to click my mouse on it. You'll notice how the box around it gets dark. Simple scatter. And then SPSS is asking us to define that. So we simply click Define. And we get, again, another one of our dialog boxes appears. Okay, and on the left-hand side are all of our variables in the data set. And we're going to move some of them over to here. So we already said that we want to look at the relationship between ELA 2014 and ELA 2013 and do a scatter plot with it. So ELA 2014 is going to serve as our y variable. I'm going to highlight that and stick it over in the y-axis window. And then ELA 2013 and stick it over in the x-axis window. And then I simply just have to click OK. And what I get is, I get a simple scatter plot, which is labeled as graph. And you'll see that the y-axis is ELA 2014, and the x-axis is ELA 2013. Now we look at the plot, okay? Notice the little dots, right? These are our points, okay? The closer the dots get together, it tells us the stronger the relationship. So the closer they get together, where they make almost like an ink blot, the stronger the relationship. The farther apart they get, the more widespread they get, okay, the weaker the relationship. So in this case, you'll notice that they're pretty close together. So where you can pretty rest assured that this is most likely a strong relationship. Now, Because something else we can do here, which is neat that you can do in SPSS, is if we take our mouse and we mouse right over the graph and we double click on it, another window pops up. This window allows us to overlay graphics onto our scatter plot. And what we're specifically going to overlay onto our scatter plot is something that we call a regression line, or the least, the line of best fit. The line of best fit, or a regression line. And in order to do that, we look at, see there's two lines of graphics here, or icons. We want to go down to this one here, and we want to go in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and double click on that. And what we wind up with, well, first of all, this box will pop up. We can get rid of that box. And what we wind up with is we wind up with the regression line. You can see this regression line right here. Okay? The closer those dots get to the line, the stronger the relationship. The other thing we wind up with is this little value up here, which is called the coefficient of determination. It's r squared. It's 0.646. 0.646. If we were to actually take the square root of that, 0.646, we need a calculator for this, we come up with a value of 0.80. 0.80 would be our Pearson-R correlation. Remember, we talked about that before. The closer it gets to 1, the stronger it is. 0.80 would be an extremely strong relationship. And it would be a positive relationship, meaning the better the students do on ELA 2013, the better they do on 2014. Now, the nice thing about a scatter plot is what a scatter plot can tell us is that not only how close the dots are, it tells us how strong the relationship is, but the direction in which they go. If they go from lower left to upper right, it's telling us it's a positive relationship. If it was reversed, if it went from upper left to lower right, it would tell us it's a negative relationship. Let's try another one. Let's go into Analyze, to Graphs. Let's go to Legacy Dialogs. Let's go to Scatter Dot. And let's look at now the relationship between the Math 2014 and the Math 2013. We click OK. Now notice how the dots are a little bit more spread apart here. So we still have a positive relationship because we're going from lower left to upper right. But now we have, and the dots there's some dots overlaying one another. They're still kind of close, but they're nowhere as near as close as this one, the English language arts. So we know there's a strong relationship between students' performance in the English language arts from one year to the next year. But in the math from one year to the next year, the relationship doesn't look like it's necessarily that strong. And we can simply or easily tell by double clicking, again, mousing over the graph, double clicking on it. When our other window appears, we want to put in our regression line, or a line of best fit, which should be the fifth one over. When this box appears, we can just get rid of it. And we look at our line, and it still looks pretty close. But look at the r square now. It's 0.637. If we take that 0.637 and we take the square root, it's still pretty strong. 0.79 would be our correlation coefficient. 0.79 would be our correlation coefficient. So it's still strong. But again, it's not as strong necessarily as the other one. So that's how we do a scatter plot. We do a scatter plot most often in conjunction with a correlation analysis. This way we get a visual representation of the relationship along with a value for the relationship. And of course, if you look at the video for correlation analysis, it will explain how to do correlation analysis in SPSS. Hope this has been helpful.